I am Lina.
I am Marcia.
Welcome to Great Minds by NBC. This year, we are so excited for what is coming, all the great people that we will have at this season in NBC Great Minds, and we just hope that you can enjoy this with us.
So today we are honored to have our guest. His name is Abhinav. He's a partner in Emerald Group and the Strategy Boutique, and he divides his time between their offices in India and the United Arab Emirates. He is an MBA from Warwick University in the UK, and he has advised a large number of companies from big conglomerates to entrepreneurial startups on how to scale up and how to grow their business overseas. Welcome, Abhinav. We are so happy to have you here.
It's the pleasure is mine. It's an honor to be here, Marcia and Lina. And good to see you guys.
Hi, Abhi. Nice to see you here. Well, actually, Marcia just tell a brief description about yourself, but we just want to hear in your words. Could you tell us, a little introduction about yourself?
Yes, of course. So, as Marcia said, I'm a management consultant. My job is to find solutions to problems that a lot of companies across the world face. And I was one of the founding partners in Strategy Boutique and Emerald Group, and we work extensively with companies across the world. So we've even done some work in Colombia, as Marcia knows, and we've done a lot of work in Europe, Middle East, and India. Those are our major markets. India, Middle East, and Europe, and of course South America, North America, and stuff like that. So consulting generally, I think, is a very misunderstood profession, is in our view, because a lot of people who you would talk to would come and say that consultants are someone who take your watch, look at your watch, tell you the time, and then keep your watch, because they're telling very basic things to you as a company. And in some ways, that is correct, because the only people who know the solutions to all the problems are people working within a company. But at the same time, sometimes it helps to get an outside perspective into problems, because there is no bias in that case. You get someone from outside who has no vested interest in what the company is doing or how they're operating, and that's where consulting becomes very, very important. And that's the one thing that we really try to bring to this industry, both in India, in Middle East, in Europe, wherever we work. We try to bring that whole new thinking around giving unbiased, honest advice. In fact, our tagline is honest consulting. That is what we stand for as a company, and we try to be as ethical, as honest, and as pragmatic as anyone should be in this industry.
Yeah, and I think it's very important the honesty and also the pragmatic, right? Because sometimes you can think that you give a solution that the company maybe cannot afford it or something, but the practical part is crucial to get things done, right, and to improve.
Yes, of course. I mean, sometimes you're faced with very challenging problems. You're faced with extremely complex, complicated business problems that companies face. And the idea is to keep it as simple as you can. The idea is to keep it as practical as you can. You don't want a client to spend $1 million to fix something that can be done in a few $1,000s, and that's an area that we as a company really try to bring to the fore. We try to make recommendations that are easy to implement, that are very well received by the client, and that don't cost the client a lot of money to just bring those changes to the market. So honesty, pragmatism, as you said, practicality, and objectiveness. I think these are the pillars around which consulting generally as an industry should be based upon. You have some very big consulting firms who are doing great work, but when they try to and they're doing great work, but some of their clients obviously have really big problems, and sometimes it doesn't cost money to fix those problems. It just takes a little bit of out of the box thinking. It takes a little bit of understanding what the client is going through to get those problems fixed and sorted, and to move on. And that is something that we as a company really focus on, and that is really one of my major interests, of how to simplify a problem as much as possible. In fact, inside the company we have something that says, no matter how complicated the problem is, the solution always is very simple. And that's our job, essentially, as consultants.
Great, great. And you have already mentioned like some things that have inspired or that inspires you every day to help businesses. But we would like to know like the story, like once you started back your own consultancy firm, what inspired you to create that and to help other businesses expanding or growing their businesses?
Yes, no, that's a very good question, Marcia. And to be very honest, before we started this consulting firm, this was back in 2013. I used to work for other consulting firms before that for a few years, for 3 or 4 years, and I realized that one of the big challenges that most companies face is the affordability part of consulting. Because all the big firms, whether it's the big four or the big 6 or 7 consulting firms globally, they are pretty much focused on the Fortune 500 companies because they are the ones who drive their entire business. Now, it's very ironic, but sometimes the smaller companies are those that need consulting more than the bigger companies because the bigger companies, anyways, have a lot of very smart, qualified people working for them. They have MBAs, they have PhDs, they have engineers, they have experts in different sectors, and they can really solve their own problems themselves, or, well, they can afford to get the big consulting firms on board. But when it comes to the mid-sized companies, they normally can't afford the kind of fees that some of the very big companies charge, some of the very big consulting firms charge. And they are the people who also don't have the kind of talent or the kind of qualified talent to problem solve that the bigger companies have. So that was a pain point that we felt existed in the market. Smaller companies need consulting. Very often, they're not able to afford consulting.
Okay.
And we try to make consulting as approachable to everyone. We made it as accessible to everyone, as affordable to everyone. So approachability, accessibility, and affordability were some of the major pain points in the industry that we tried to fill. And over the years, we found that even the bigger consulting firms sometimes come to the bigger clients come to us for advice because these three I would say pillars of affordability, accessibility, and approachability work for everyone. No matter whether you're a big firm or a small firm, you want pragmatic, practical solutions, and you want it to be affordable, accessible, and easily available to you at all points in time. So that's something that we've really tried to work very closely on.
Well, actually, that's amazing that during this year you have managed how to get the pillars of the company. But that's bringing me to think that you already have have this segmentation of each company that could approach you. But how was the beginning? Like the first client, the first customer, how did you approach to manage them without the knowledge that you already have?
Yes, so that's very interesting. So when we started this, we obviously didn't have any clients at the start. We had a few very warm connects that we could reach out to for work. It was mainly first and second degree connections. When a couple of us got together to start this, we started reaching out within our networks. We all had experience working in consulting with bigger companies. We had experience solving problems. We had experience making business plans and all of that. And the first few clients were word of mouth. They came from first degree connections and second degree connections. And then after a point, I think it's your work that starts speaking for you. So if you do something really good for someone, they're going to talk to 5 other people about how good you are, and they're going to start connecting you to those people. So that is something that we've always tried very hard to focus on. Not a lot of consulting firms have major marketing budgets. They don't need to market what they do. In consulting, there's a very interesting thing that you don't have a product, you are the product. If you work very well, you're basically going and selling yourself to clients, or all the entire team is selling itself to clients just to get a chance to work with them on an assignment and deliver a good product. And as long as you can keep doing that over and over again, getting clients becomes that much easier. Yes, business development is challenging. We constantly looking at new techniques to onboard clients, but the basic fundamentals is of doing any business is, if your product is good, people will come to you. And in consulting, you yourself are the product. So if you're good and you're good at what you do, people definitely will come to you. So that's something that we as a company really believe in.
That's great, the process and how to start, like not having any clients to start growing with your work. Also,
Yes.
we know that strategic planning is crucial on all this process because it allows you to have like a roadmap to where to go, right? How important was this part of the process for you and for your clients?
So, well, in any industry, you've got to stay connected with the ground realities. You've got to adapt and give bespoke solutions. Now, something that works for you may not work for Lina or vice versa. Something that works for a client here in maybe in India may not work for a client in Paris, or may not work for a client in Munich or Dubai. There are cultural differences. There are lots of nuances about how business is done in different parts of the world, whether it's legal, political, geographic, or even cultural or social aspects of doing business. And that is something that all the big successful companies that you see around the world, they always adapt their product to the market. Like, let's say, between the two of the biggest markets in the world are the US market and the Chinese market, or the European market, Union market. So those are two or three big markets in the world. A campaign that works very well in the US for a company is obviously going to be very different in Europe, and it's going to be very, very different in China, because you've got to take into account the cultural sensibilities of people. You've got to take into account what they like to do, what they like to hear, what they believe in, what they aspire to be, what they stand for. And all of those things become extremely challenging in a very global environment. The most successful companies in the world are not confined to one region. They are all over the world. You look at any of the top companies. Apple sells its products in every country in the world. Microsoft is everywhere. Google is everywhere. And that's just one industry. Go to maybe automobile. You've got Mercedes. You've got BMW. They're German companies, but they're pretty much all over the world. You've got the Japanese automobile manufacturers that are all over the world.
Yeah.
But what they do in one geography is very different to what they do in another geography. And as consultants, it's our job to give them as much of local knowledge as we possibly can. And which is why it's very important for us to network with people across the world to better understand different cultures, different connotations, different nuances. And that's why, when, let's say, when I come to South America, which is sometime, it's great to know people such as you, because I would understand what works very well in Latin America from you, and that can then get synthesized into passing on to a client who wants to enter the same markets. So it's just all about understanding who your client is, what they want, and who their target market is and what they want. And if you can just tie these two in very closely, you have a very good, compelling product for them.
Well, actually, that's great for the question that I want to ask you, because like right now there is too many companies that want to scale up, and it's
Yes.
so challenging for them to know that part. And I think it would be great to have the things that you said, or any advice that maybe you could add to that. And
Yeah.
also the priorities. Sometimes
Yeah.
we are like mixing what the priorities are when you want to scale up. So maybe,
Right.
do you have any advice for it?
Uh, Look, in any business, Lena, there are things that you absolutely have to do. There are things
Mm-hmm.
that are good to do, and there are things that you do if you have enough bandwidth, enough resources, and you have the desire to do those things. And when you're setting up any business, let's say, I'm sure you do the same at MBC as well, there are things that you absolutely have to do to survive as a company and to grow as a company. Then there are things that you want to do because you think it's great to be doing these things, your competitors are doing it. And if you want to compete in that market, you need to be doing similar things. And then there are things that you feel nice about yourself. So those are typically very important. But a lot of companies that are not very successful ignore those things. Now, why would someone, let's say, someone who wants to work in technology, want to work for a Google or an Apple? Because they take care of their employees. A smaller tech company may not do that as much. Now, those are things that you feel good about doing, but if you don't do it, you're still going to succeed as a company. You're still going to have a good product. You're still going to be reaching out to customers, but you may not have a very engaged workforce. And that level of engagement that your workforce has in a business determines how successful you are in the long term. So in the short term, you might have a few very good wins. You might get some big projects, but those same people would constantly be looking for a job at Google or a job at Apple or a job at Microsoft, and the minute they get something, they would leave and transfer all the skills that they learned with you to another company. So to be successful, you've obviously got a priority list. You've got things that you need to do to stay afloat, to stay alive, and to grow. But then there are things you also need to do to make sure that people are growing with you. So as you as a company grow, you get carrying a whole bunch of people with you who are relying on you for their growth and for their development. And we very often have clients who come to us saying that we want to do an employee engagement survey, and it's going to cost maybe $50,000 or whatever. It's going to cost a lot of money to do something like this. But we internally decided if we do this, we would know what our employees want and how they could potentially be more engaged or be happier working in a company. And that's just one example. There are so many things, there's so many different priorities that companies have. It's very important to segment them and very important to tick off as many boxes as you possibly can. That is critical in any business. Did I answer your question, Lina?
Yeah, pretty well. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more with the workforce. Like, it's very important, and also to us at MBC, it's the most important thing with our people and all that, to be happy and have like a insightful job and project. You were mentioning some very important things as to understanding the client needs, what they want. Do you have by chance like a tool or something like that to actually understand? Because it sounds like simple, but to find actually what the customer wants, especially in another country, like how can we identify that?
Yes. So there are no tools, Marcia. There are. I just correct you there. There are no tools. There are techniques. There are processes, and there are ways to do things. Now, consulting by definition is extremely bespoke. What works for one client will not work for another, and that's why you can't rely on a one-size-fits-all tool or approach for everyone. You've got to have very, very different approaches. Now, I'll give you an example. We have worked for an airline before. We've worked for a number of very big healthcare companies. That's a big part of our business. Sports is another very big part of our business. And why I'm telling you all this is just so you understand the diversity of all our clients. Sports is an extremely big part of our business. Technology, we've been doing some work, as you're aware, we've been doing some work in the technology space, and that's something that we're trying to grow over the next few years. Now, clients across these industries are very different. A sports company is more interested in development and retention of athletes, in getting them to perform at the highest level or giving them the right infrastructure to perform. A healthcare company is interested in being the first to bring a drug to the market. Now, whether it's a vaccine, whether it's a medicine, they're interested in building supply chains for different products. They want their drugs to be available across the world to people who need those medicines. And obviously, because they're profit-making companies, they want people to be able to afford those medicines. Now, whether it's directly out of pocket or through insurance or whatever. If you're looking at hospitality, hotels, it's more of a luxury industry. There, you want to give people an experience when they come to you. So you have a lot of different approaches. The way you work with a healthcare company would be very different to what you would do for a hospitality company, for a luxury goods company, for a sports company. But the underlying problems are very similar. Think about it. What do companies want to do the most? They want to make profits. They want to make money. They want to expand their market share. They want to get new customers. Now, that is the same, whether it's a healthcare company, whether it's a hospitality company, whether it's a consumer goods company. FMCG is a big industry for us, whether it's an FMCG company. They all want to do the same 3 or 4 things: increase your profits, increase your sales, get more customers, reduce the cost of sales, try to launch new products and go into new markets. It's all the same, and that's where you rely on a lot of consulting tools, which is making business plans, doing feasibility studies, trying to do market penetration, trying to understand who your competition is in the form of competitor mapping, trying to devise using various tools in like pestle, like porters. Those are like the things that are normally done to death. Now, whether it's a SWOT analysis, etc., we obviously customize each of these according to what the client wants and according to the industry in which they are in.
No.
So that is how I would say we look at various different approaches. So very often, a mid-sized client of ours would come to us with a simple thing that we want to enter, let's say, Japan. That's it. That's the problem. Now, to solve that problem, you need to start with whether it's feasible to enter Japan or not. That's the feasibility study. If it is, then you make a business plan of how to spend money, how to allocate your resources to enter Japan. To do that, also, you need to understand who the competition is. That's your competition mapping. You need to understand what the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors are. That's a SWOT. To do the feasibility, you need to understand what the political, economic, social, technological, legal, environment is. That's the pestle. So all the similar tools get used in most projects, but they're very customized for each client and each particular problem that they bring up. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Like, even though all the clients want almost the same, like the profits and the clients and everything, doesn't mean that has to be the same way to approach each client, because everyone has different needs.
Yes.
Actually, I think you have discovered this because you have been working with too many cultures, you have been involved with too many countries, and that's really the thing. Have you have any anecdote or something that happened to you when you were related to any culture that you didn't know?
Oh, it happens all the time. Trust me. It happens all the time. So I'll give you a very simple example. Uh, the entire world is off on Saturdays and Sundays, or typically on Sundays. The Middle East is open on Sundays. Their weekly off is Fridays and Saturdays for most of the Middle East. But Sunday is a full working day. And the first time, Dubai now has moved to a Monday to Friday week with Saturdays and Sundays off. But generally, most of the Middle East is off on Fridays and Saturdays, and they work from Sunday to Thursday. And the first time, I think this was 7 or 8 years back, when we were doing some business development meetings in Dubai, and we actually landed in Dubai at the start of their weekend, thinking that, well, we could maybe set up a whole bunch of meetings on Friday. And a couple of people actually responded saying that, hey, what world are you living in? It's Friday is our weekly off. And we landed in Dubai on Thursday, thinking that we'll do some meetings on Friday, spend Saturday and Sunday to do some internal brainstorming, and then get back on Monday. And then we realized the entire trip, was planned incorrectly. And that's a very simple thing. And we really should have just checked the calendars, and we would have known that can be done. And lots of things happen, when you're meeting. And again, I'll keep going back to, let's say, if you're going to Africa for work, and we do some projects in Africa, people never ever show up on time. Now, that's something that we normally take as for a granted in most parts of the world. So if you've got a meeting at 10, the guy's only going to show up at 11 or 11:30 if you're lucky. And he may not even show up. Those are things you build into the way you work in those regions. And I mean, I've had people I was in Africa once, and in Kenya, and we set up a couple of meetings, and the first guy just texted 5 minutes back that he was running 4 hours late, and that's messed up our entire day afterwards, because we had a few meetings during the whole day. Luckily, everyone was running late that day, because that's Africa, so no one is ever on time. So we still could get something out of it, but those are things that we realize as we go on in the process. In Europe, for instance, and Europe is, as I said, one of the biggest markets for us. Language sometimes becomes a barrier. If you're working in France, for instance, they would prefer if you got a French translator with you, or you got someone who understands French in your team. Some countries are a bit more, they would prefer that a bit more, like France would, for instance. Not so much in Germany, where they're more than happy to speak in English with you. So those are very different cultural nuances. In some cultures, it's perfectly acceptable to take a client out for dinner over alcohol. In some countries, you don't do that at all. It's just maybe coffee, and that's the only beverage that. So you learn all this as you start ingraining yourself in cultures. And because our job involves working around the world, we need to understand these things really well. And over the years, I think we've become better at it, but there's so much more to learn, every day when we do all this. There's a lot to learn on a daily basis.
That's true.
That's very interesting. Although in our case, like Colombian people, we are like more, how are you? Like do like an introduction in business. And for instance, in North America, people is like, no, just business. To say hello, just go right to the point. And we had to learn about this. And how to
I know. In fact, whenever I've been in Bogota for meetings, almost every meeting has led to either a lunch afterwards or dinner and a lot of alcohol. It's been standard. No matter who you're meeting, they will invite you for a meal afterwards. If it's around in the morning, it'll lead into a lunch, and if it's in the evening, it leads into dinner. And I've seen that very often. And I think because that's the culture. I think South America is people are more hospitable. They know that you're not from there. They want to make you feel welcome, so they try to make that effort to spend some time and take you around. In North America, as you said, it's mostly about just getting work done, and that's the same in the UK as well. If you're in England, they don't care really. You've got a time, you show up, you do your meeting, and you leave. But if you go to Spain, for instance, or you go to Spain is a great example. They again go out of the way to welcome you, and I think it's the whole Spanish influence in South America as well that I think is.
Yeah.
So it's just I think a lot of it is like in India, for instance, people try to take you out. If you're in India for meetings, very often it leads into an after meeting, so to say. So where you do something, them out, you're more sociable in India. So those are things that you realize as you go along.
Okay. So, like talking about this, I know that it depends also the culture and the industry, but in general, like, what would be the process or the easiest way to, like, once I know it's feasible to go to Japan, for instance, or to Asia, like, what is the easiest way or the normal way to adapt your business to that country? Like, once you're getting there.
The easiest way is actually to go to that country, spend a week there, because there's no substitute to actually being in a market where you want to take your client. And very often, and which is why we have our focus. Which is why we as a company have our focus areas, and our focus areas remain what we are. But then, obviously, we're not going to say no to work. But then you go before you travel. You just don't buy the first ticket and get on a plane. You don't ever do that. Before you travel, you try to look within your connections to see people who are there, who could be sort of your eyes and ears on the ground, who could introduce you to more people. You try to make as many connections as you can even before you start thinking about traveling, because travel has a huge cost. It has a huge opportunity cost on time as well, and not all travel is very productive or fruitful. So to get the most out of a trip, you need to do all your homework even before you think of going on that trip. And very often when we work on client projects, our clients do expect us to be on the ground at least at one part of the project, at least when we're doing maybe just understanding the pulse of the customer, or when we're trying to understand the competition, or we're trying to just understand cultural nuances. That's what they pay us for, and that's something that we very often charge back to the client if it needs to be done. But yes, without travel, or even before you travel, there's a lot you can do. You start working your LinkedIn to see who you know in those countries, and you'll be surprised. You have so many second degree connections all over the world in every country that it becomes that much easier, and people generally are more than happy to help you. And a lot of times we do it for without expecting anything in return, and a lot of people then you just keep passing the favors around and you keep helping people out. But talking to people, I think, is the first thing. Reading up a lot about the market that you want to go to. Let's say Japan is a market that a client wants to enter. Reading up a lot about Japan, talking to people there, trying to understand as much as you can remotely is key. And especially in the pandemic, I hope we're nearing the end of the pandemic, but the last 2 years where travel has been severely restricted, we've started falling back a lot on these secondary tools to try and understand different markets, trying to understand different cultures, networking with as many people. A lot of events now are being held virtually, which makes it more accessible, I think, to everyone, because not everyone, or we can't afford to go to events every time. You don't have that much time, and you don't even have those budgets to keep going everywhere every time there is something. But if you're
Yeah.
doing it virtually, it becomes that much easier, because then you can attend even 4 events in a week in different parts of the world, really. So as consultants, I think we get paid to to give recommendations, and the only way your recommendation is going to be pragmatic, and I keep going back to those words, feasible, practical, is if you know what the reality on the ground is. And there are so many offline and online ways to understand that.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think even in the same country, the cultural difference can be like a thing, like for instance, Bogota and Medellin, in Colombia, for instance, it's very different. So what works there cannot work here. So it's something to have in mind as well.
Yes. No, of course. And that's, I mean, the biggest example of that is India, for instance. What happens in the north of India is very, very different to what happens in the south of India, or what happens in the east or west. I mean, it's a massive country. There are hundreds of different cultures in the country. There are dozens of languages. There are thousands of dialects. Food is different from one part of the country to the other. And another very close example of that would be Europe. If you look at it as one entity, even neighboring countries are so different. The French are very different to the Germans, to the Swiss. The Austrians are very different. The Spanish people are very different. So, all of those things, when you start adding up, you realize that no two people are the same. And that's a mistake that some companies have made, let's say historically, in maybe the Middle East or in Africa, where they look at Africa as one entity. But Africa, as we found out, is a whole bunch of different cultures, different entities there. Even Latin America historically has been clubbed as one, but I'm sure you guys would know that Colombia is very different to Argentina, which is very different to Mexico, which is very different to Brazil. Brazil even speaks a different language, So there are so many subtle differences in even in neighboring countries that you can't afford to ignore at all. And even closer home is the point that within the same country, as you were just saying, what happens in Bogota could be very different to Medellin or Cali or whatever. So, it's just so very different that these are things that almost every company that wants to do business in a region should start respecting that about people. You can't have a one size fits all policy. That is not going to work, and it's very disrespectful for your target market as well to have a one size fits all approach without understanding what they really want or how they want to be seen as. Yeah.
well, I think that's really important and brings me to think that it's not only in the business area, it's also in the real life that you have to put in other shoes because you have
Yeah.
to understand how is the other perspective.
Yeah.
And this has been really amazing and all the advices that you have given us like in the business area. But before we finish, I would like to end it up with something about you, like as a person. Like
Yeah.
you have been given advice about companies, about strategies, but for you, but what do you think which are the things that bring you in the position that you are right now as a person, as a human being, and also as a professional?
I think that's a very deep question, because I'm still trying to figure out who I am as a person. It's very hard for me to put that in words, but I think your experiences in life shape you more than anything else. You experience so much, right, from your school to university to grad school to all of that to your first few jobs. I think they go a long way in shaping you. You also get shaped a lot by where you live, whether you've had a chance to travel around a little bit, maybe on holidays and stuff like that. You get a chance to also, meet new people. Your friends, your family. I think they play a very big role in shaping who you are. And I think we all have multiple personalities. All of us. I think we could typically be wearing a suit and a tie or a dress in your case to work, and then at 6 in the evening we just let our hair down and go and dance till 4 in the morning. So there are different personalities or different aspects of us that come out of different situations. And and I think that's great. That's the one I think big advantage of living in the world that we do today. Is everything is so accessible, everything is so within our means, and those things keep shaping you in more ways than one. Um, I like having a good time. I like to work hard. I like meeting people. I like to read sometimes when I get time. Everyone watches, I think, a couple of hours of Netflix every day. We do so many things to unwind and relax, and yeah, I think we're all pretty much we just into the usual things that keep us ticking. But yes, I think it's very complicated to figure out who you are as a person. You could be very different versions of yourself every day, right? And as long as you're a better version, I think every day, I think that's it.
That's true.
Yeah.
So great, Abby. We are so happy and grateful to share with us your knowledge, these amazing insights on how, and we have learned a lot about what to have in mind once you are thinking about funding international. So thank you very much, Abby. It was such a pleasure to have you here, and we hope.
No, the pleasure is all mine, Marcia. And I keep learning a lot from you guys, from what you guys do, because you guys are, I think you guys are amazing in terms of what you're trying to achieve as a company, as individuals. It's great, and it's a bit of an inspiration for all of us. So I think this has been a great session. Thank you for having me, and yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abby. It was a pleasure to have you. Bye bye.
it was mine. Bye.